Welcome to the Need to Know podcast from the Wilson Center, a podcast for policymakers available to everyone. Always informative, nonpartisan, and relevant, we go beyond the headlines to understand the trend lines in foreign policy. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Need to Know. I'm your host, John Milewski. Need to Know is brought to you by the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. The center is congressionally chartered, scholarship-driven, and fiercely nonpartisan. Well, now that the dust is settling after the closely watched German elections, we thought this would be a good opportunity to hear from Robin Quinville, the director of the Wilson Center's Global Europe program, about what transpired and what it could mean for Germany-U.S. relations, for the EU, among other things. So, Robin, you were in Germany as the votes were being cast. What was the mood like? And was there a sense of this being a potentially pivotal election?
There absolutely was a sense that this election was important. It was taking place at a critical time and that it was going to be critical for Germany's future. It had a very high vote turnout, 82%, which is massive and shows the interest.
For any democracy worldwide, that number is off the charts.
Absolutely. And people also were looking at this not only for what it meant for Germany internally and where its future goes on the whole range of pocketbook issues that affect people's day-to-day lives, but also where Germany will be in the world, particularly in a period right after the Munich Security Conference, when questions arose about the strength of the U.S.-European relationship. So I think all of that combined to bring voters out knowing that their vote mattered in this election and it would determine at time what course their government took.
As most elections are, right, there are internal, external factors, and there's the famous mantra, I think it was Jim Carville who first said it, right, with it's the economy stupid, and certainly in Germany, the economy loomed large, but also what you mentioned, the transatlantic relationship, the tensions over trade and tariffs and Ukraine and Russia. Is there any sense from exit polling or those types of things about what really drove the vote? What was first and foremost in voters' minds?
No, I don't think it was possible to actually do a first and foremost, also because of the tight time frame between the Munich Security Conference and the vote itself. It was 1 week, right? And so some of those questions that made the U.S. relationship an issue in the election, it's very hard to pull that apart from the dissatisfaction with economic developments that had been a driver on the election throughout. So it is the security investments that are needed, but also how to drive the economy forward. That was really the key issue for most Germans.
One report said the results of the election should be greeted with a mixture of relief and grave concern. Explain that to us.
Okay. The thing to remember is that every government in Germany is going to be a coalition government. They don't have the same two-party system that we have. They have a plethora of parties. They have to meet a certain threshold to get into their parliament. But the last government was 3 parties, and it proved very difficult to reconcile their various goals. So it fell apart early. This time, it was, okay, what are going to be the parties that make it into parliament, and how strong will they be, and what kind of coalition will you have? Now, everyone was watching the far right populist party, AfD, which stands for Alternative for Germany. What would be their vote share? Would it rise, and by how much? And what would that mean? Because all the other parties have pledged they would not bring this far right party into government. So how would they be able to form a coalition? That was the critical question for voters. And yet, if we look at the figures, AfD got 20% of the vote.
Mm-hmm. Which is 10 million people, roughly, right?
And and also that is, this is a substantial chunk. It's double what it got the previous election. But at the same time, under some of the polling that was predicting it might do better.
So, Robin, how do we interpret that? I mean, Germany, we all live, with the celebrating our past and the burden of our history. And certainly Germans have lived with the burden of their Nazi history in World War II and World War I. So, a lot of people are very uncomfortable at seeing the rise of AfD's popularity. How should we interpret this? What does it mean about where Germany might be headed?
For the party that came out first in the polling, the conservatives, the traditional conservatives, they are looking at this as right wake-up call on the issues that voters turned to AFD for. And for them, just to go back to what you said from James Cromwell, it's the economy. There has been stagnant growth in Germany. Germany is a manufacturing economy. There has been an uneven distribution of wealth within Germany in the years since reunification. We somehow here think, oh, it was all so easy. No, a lot of the East German states are still very under-economically developed and experiencing hard times. But Germany as a whole has not experienced growth since the pandemic. So a lot of people turned to a party that seemed to answer their concerns about this stagnant growth. It also seemed to answer their concerns about migration. For the conservatives, they know that what they need to do is take those two issues and address them and show real progress in order to wean votes from AFD that would not normally have voted there, right? That, I think, is what their strategy is, and their goal is to put together a coalition government that will be able to drive those changes.
So it would be fair to say that at least a chunk of those 10 million people weren't voting for what some might refer to as the darker elements of what AFD might represent, but were essentially casting a protest vote against the status quo?
I wouldn't want to predict how much of that was actually, protest versus attraction to some of that ideology, but certainly their voters were a mix, right? And it was very hard to see. I think for the conservatives, hard to pull in everybody with their mantra of growth because they had been in the government just 3 years before under Angela Merkel. The new leader, Friedrich Merz, is saying it's going to be different under me. So I think that what we're going to see from this government, if Merz can form a coalition with one other party, probably the SPD, the Socialist Party, they will have to deliver if they're going to change that percentile vote for the AFD.
So this is a wake-up call to the status quo.
It's sort of a wake-up shout, actually.
Yeah, a wake-up shout. So on this, the economy, we can't separate cleanly the economy from security concerns or defense concerns because a dollar is a dollar, or a Deutschmark is a Deutschmark, right?
A euro is a euro.
A euro is a euro. I'm showing my age, Robin. What can I tell you? But what can, with Merz and what can the German government do to jumpstart the economy? They've shown slow growth, slower than many of their European neighbors. What can they do?
Friedrich Merz, the thing to remember about him is he got his first political job in the European Parliament. He was elected to the European Parliament. So he knows the European Union very well. The European Union is strongly focused on regulatory issues and regulation. What he wants to do is target regulation both within the German system, but also within the EU, because he feels that if you can remove some of these regulatory barriers to investment, to speed of growth and so forth, that will in fact spur the German economy and spur the European economy moving ahead. And he knows Germany has many very strong manufacturing elements that feel held back by some of this regulation. And so I think this is something where he, with his particular EU background that he brings, might be very well placed in order to tackle that. But that's where he's put his emphasis, that they need a policy change and they need to spur growth.
On another matter, on the security questions, Merz in a recent speech said the Trump administration, as in his words, does not care much for Europe, and therefore Europe should take immediate steps to become independent of Washington. How serious are the Germans and the rest of the EU about some sort of separation from the United States? And what about the United States and its relationship with Germany in particular, but Europe in general? It's not just the administration. There are members of Congress who will have some say in this. Paint the picture for us of where this might be headed in terms of the bigger picture.
Friedrich Merz's comments show is a level of uncomfortableness with where the U.S.-Europe transatlantic relationship that's held so strong for so long is going. And in his eyes, it's okay, we must be realistic and prepare for the fact that there may be a US that is less engaged in Europe or is less willing to be a partner for us. It's I think not a prediction that the US is somehow just going to pick up and go in the next 3 weeks, but rather that Europe needs to understand that it must grow its capabilities and be able to stand absent some of the elements of the transatlantic relationship that they have come to rely on. Chief among that is defense, of course. This is something where they know they need to grow their defense spending. They need to grow the actual capabilities that they have on the ground. Those capabilities are really important for deterrence. So throughout, this has been one of the lessons of the invasion of Ukraine, that they know that it is a different strategic environment. They need to grow their defense spending and security spending and investment on all kinds of counter intelligence operations and so forth. They need to grow their engagement and their investment. It's tough because it's a tough economic environment, but they know that they need to do that.
So in the few minutes we have remaining, I know that it's a fluid situation and things change quickly. But as we discuss this on this date, where do things stand with the forming of the new government in Germany and putting together the coalition and moving forward?
Okay, you're going to have to brace yourself, John, for this. All right, they want to do this coalition agreement in record time, 8 weeks. And you're going to say to me, Robert, what do you mean 8 weeks? It takes 8 weeks. You have to hammer out with your coalition partner a written down agreement about what your goals are and what you're going to do, right? So you just know that two political leaders and their teams are not going to get together and do that overnight. But when Merz said 8 weeks, everybody sort of said, oh my God, so fast. But I think there really is a commitment to do this in a very short, compressed time frame. The last time it took more than 4 months, if I remember rightly. So it can take longer. But what they are looking at is saying, right, the period of the last parliament ends officially on the 25th of March, right? So they would not be able to pass legislation beyond that until they have their coalition agreement done and they have their government formed. And they also know that this is no time to be without a government. Right?
Mm-hmm. The stakes are high. The issues are urgent.
High. You don't want to have a caretaker. You want to get going with the things that are on people's minds. And so, honestly, I think they will try I think they'll really try to meet that 8-week deadline. And I would urge them to
move faster. Wow. Well, thank you, Robin, as always. Very informative. I want to tell our listeners and viewers, if you're interested in learning more, go to wilsoncenter.org. You'll see a programs tab at the top of the page, and that's where you can find the Wilson Center's Global Europe program and all the good work of Robin and her colleagues. We'll be back with another episode of Need to Know soon. Until then, for all of us at the Wilson Center, I'm John Milewski. Thanks for your time and interest. Thanks, Robin.